There is one 9-page chapter about Cheers, a couple of brief mentions here and there, and I do mean very brief, and that is it. So far is Kelsey Grammer's memoir from 1995. He had only just recently finished a 9-year stint as Frasier in Cheers, and for this to include 1 page per year of playing Frasier in Cheers, that's not great. There is one brief chapter about Frasier, the TV show, and it is literally just about the auditions and how it came about. Really fascinating. Really enjoyed that chapter. The chapter on Cheers is largely just talking about Shelley Long, and I love Shelley Long, but it's kind of bittersweet. So all of that to say is that so far is a tremendous disappointment. Now, I will say before I go any further, I absolutely adore Kelsey Grammer, and I like his writing style. I like the style of writing in this. Unfortunately, it is very, very much all style and basically zero substance. The first couple of chapters, pretty good. I will talk about those in a moment, but I won't spoil anything, just in case you do decide to read this, so I won't go into too much detail. But the further you get into it, the more it feels like an incredibly rushed job. It's basically a glorified version of Wikipedia. Maybe in 1995 that would be acceptable, but even then I feel like if you were paying for this in 1995, and you're obviously expecting, as the cover suggests, anecdotes about Kelsey Grammer's time playing Frasier, again, at this point the bulk of that was on Cheers, you're going to be very, very disappointed. And I'll be honest, as soon as this arrived in the post, I was suspicious about how much would actually be in this, because not only is it relatively thin, not tremendously thin, but thin enough, but the writing is pretty large. The writing size is quite big. It's not a large print version, but it is quite a large print. And immediately I just thought, well, that can't have that many anecdotes in it. And honestly, it doesn't. Once his career begins, which I'd say happens about a third of the way through, it is basically, this is where I was living, this is who I was dating, and usually there's some kind of praise for his own ego at some point. Now, since I love Kelsey Grammer, I don't mind that. He can praise himself as much as he wants. But if you're kind of not the biggest fan of Kelsey Grammer, but you want to read this to get to know more about him, he paints himself in a very, very favourable light. Let's put it that way. But I do like him, so I don't mind that. But it is very much a case of, this is where I was living, this is who I was dating, this is the role I had at the time, moving on to the next chapter, and it's the same thing. As I said with the Cheers chapter, the 9-page Cheers chapter, it is largely about Shelley Long. And I love her. He said something. I'll show you one thing that I thought was kind of nice, but also not very nice. But I'll do that at the end, because I guess it is a small spoiler for something that's in this. The beginning is interesting. It's about his childhood, growing up. Something pretty tragic, in fact, incredibly tragic, happened to him and his family. And I won't say what it is. I was aware of it, but I didn't know in that much detail. And maybe that's why I preferred the first third of the book, because for me that was all really fascinating. Whereas if you followed Kelsey Grammer's career at all, the bulk of the rest of it is very much just fact-based. There's not a lot of emotion, there's not a lot of opinion, there are hardly any anecdotes. It is very formulaic. Basically, this is where I was, this is who I was dating, this is the character I was playing, and it just feels very impersonal for the majority of it. Put it this way, I feel like the bulk of it could be written by a biographer rather than Kelsey Grammer himself, and the fact that he was very much known for Frasier at the time, definitely the case now as well, and basically none of this is about the character of Frasier. It's a little bit disappointing, so I don't love it. I don't think it's very good. Only if you're a massive Kelsey Grammer fan do I recommend reading it. But that being said, if you're a massive Kelsey Grammer fan, I can't imagine you'd learn very much about this. And as I said, there are not that many anecdotes, or we get some emotion, but not a tremendous amount. So I'd say only read it if you're a big fan, but if you're a big fan, I don't really know what you'd get out of it. But as I said, the writing style I do really like. If Kelsey Grammer were to release another book, I would jump onto it immediately. So very, very disappointed, but the writing style is quite nice, and the first third, basically up until the career begins, is interesting, really interesting in fact, which is strange because usually when it comes to memoirs, autobiographies, the whole growing up, childhood thing, adolescent thing, I read it, but that's not why I'm there. I'm there for the career anecdotes. I'm there for the industry insights. And that part of it is so badly done. So far is honestly pretty terrible. The writing style is really nice, but the structure, the pacing, it's not good at all. And I'll now show you the one thing about Shelley Long that I was going to mention. This isn't the bit that I was going to mention, but this is in the Cheers chapter. In passing, he's just like, I found escape in cocaine. Okay, there's some juicy story. There has to be something there. Let's just not mention that in any more detail. So just really, really not good at all, unfortunately. There are two things actually that I want to point out. And the first one is, this is what I was initially looking for. And it's where he writes, and even though she was unpleasant, she was not a bitch, referring to Shelley Long. And I think that that's really important because Shelley Long, I love her. I absolutely love her. But there are stories of her being not the easiest to work with. And Kelsey Grammer talks quite a bit about this in the book. And he explains that, as he says there, she's not a bitch. The reason she is the way she is, he points it out quite well actually, is that she can only see things from her own perspective. She doesn't do anything to be nasty or malicious. It is just basically the way she works, the way her mind works. And I really appreciated that. Yes, he may be saying some unpleasant things about her, but at the same time, he's pointing out that she's not a nasty person. She's just maybe not easy to work with. And I think that that was important. And I guess I appreciated him saying that. And this is the other bit I wanted to mention, but I think I'm overthinking it because he says here, we're at the end of the Cheers chapter, and he says, John and George, Ted, and after Nick died, Woody, Rhea, and finally Kirsty were all people I loved and admired. And that's after he spent a couple of pages saying how unpleasant Shelley Long was, and he doesn't mention her there, which is not nice to read, but he also doesn't mention Baby Newworth, and I don't think he has any ill feelings towards her as far as I know. So maybe it was an oversight, and that's what I'm going to think of nevertheless. With regards to the actual Cheers part, honestly, there's no substance to it. There are a few very tiny, well, not even so much an anecdote as just a couple of lines of exchange between Kelsey Grammer and Nicholas Colasanto, which was nice to read. Other than that, there's nothing in it. Definitely style, beautiful style, really lovely writing style. Absolutely no complaints there. And unfortunately, very, very, very little substance. So the only people to whom I would recommend this probably won't learn very much. So it's a little bit awkward. However, if Kelsey Grammer releases something else, I will immediately want to read it. I will immediately buy it as soon as possible. On the bright side, I'm now going to go and read James Burrows' book. And I believe there are a lot of stories in that about Cheers and so on. So very much looking forward to that. However, as far as so far goes, the writing style is gorgeous. The actual book itself doesn't really have anything to offer.